The most dangerous man in Seoul was crying, and the person who made it happen was a black woman he'd never met, holding a key and 5 words that would unravel his entire life. "Your father sent me." He had just been told he had 6 months to live. He believed his father had been dead for 20 years. He was wrong. That man was Kang Yi-hyun. He controlled a multi-million-dollar empire built on fear and respect. But in that hospital room, facing his own mortality, he was utterly powerless against a past he thought was buried. The key she held wasn't just to a safe deposit box. It was to a truth so devastating. It would force Seoul's most feared crime boss to confront the one man he never could, the father who abandoned him. To understand why those 5 words shattered him, you have to understand the fortress Kang Yi-hyun built, and the boy who built it, alone from nothing. His story doesn't start in a boardroom or a back alley, but in a single-room gasiwon in the Dongdaemun district. 1998. Yi-hyun is 8 years old. His mother works 3 cleaning jobs. His father, Kang Min-seok, is a taxi driver who dreams of buying his own cab. The dream is a concrete block in their tiny apartment. Min-seok talks about it at dinner, traces routes on a worn map, calculates fares late into the night. For a year, he saves everyone. The day he brings the contract home, he hugs Yi-hyun so tight the boy can't breathe. "For us," he says, "for our future." 1 week later, Min-seok doesn't come home. Yi-hyun and his mother wait all night. The police are indifferent. A missing cab driver is not a priority. Days turn to weeks. No body, no note, no money. The savings for the taxi are gone from their hiding place. The only thing left is the heavy metal key to a locker at the Seoul Station bus terminal. Inside the locker, they find a sealed envelope addressed to Yi-hyun's mother. She opens it, reads it, and without a word, burns it over the stove. She never tells her son what it said. She gets sick that winter, a cough that becomes pneumonia. In a public hospital without money for the better antibiotics, she fades. Her last words to her 11-year-old son, "He didn't leave us. Something took him. Promise me you won't become hard." He broke that promise within a year. Orphaned, he lived in the streets around the old Noryangjin fish market. He survived by being observant, by being quiet, and by being willing to do the things other boys wouldn't. He ran errands for stall owners who paid him in food. He collected protection fees from smaller vendors for a local enforcer named Big Choi. He was small, but he had a terrifying quality, absolute stillness. While other boys fidgeted, Yi-hyun could watch and wait for hours. Big Choi noticed. He gave the 15-year-old a job as a lookout. Yi-hyun saw everything: the police bribes, the rival gangs, the secret deliveries. He filed it all away. His turning point came at 17. A collection job went wrong. A loan shark from a rival group, the Jumgangpa, pulled a knife on Big Choi. In the frantic scramble, it was Yi-hyun, the silent lookout, who didn't scramble. He picked up a lead pipe and brought it down on the shark's wrist. The crack was loud. The knife clattered away. He didn't hit the man's head or body. He targeted the weapon. Calculated, efficient. Big Choi stared at the boy, then at the screaming man. "You think like a boss," he grunted, "not a thug." By 22, Yi-hyun had his own crew, not through brute force but through strategy. He targeted failing nightclubs owned by desperate men, offered security solutions they couldn't refuse, and took a percentage. He never called it protection. He called it a partnership. He laundered the money through a chain of coin-operated karaoke rooms, then a small construction firm. He was building a legitimate facade brick by brick. And with every brick, he buried the memory of the boy in the asterisk gasiwon a little deeper. But the ghost of his father was the foundation of it all. The abandonment was the furnace of his ambition. Every business conquered was proof he didn't need the man who left. Every enemy broken was revenge on the invisible force that took his family. He cultivated a reputation of ice-cold control. He was feared for his patience, for his long silences that ended in decisive, irreversible action. He had women but no partner. He had soldiers but no friends. His empire, Kang Holdings, was a fortress with one occupant, the orphan who swore he'd never be vulnerable again. which is why the diagnosis was a betrayal from within. Routine tests, unexplained weight loss. The doctor in his private clinic voiced carefully neutral, advanced pancreatic cancer, aggressive, inoperable, 6 months perhaps, quality of life would degrade quickly. Yi Hyun sat in the leather chair, his expression not changing. He thanked the doctor, walked out, and drove himself to his penthouse. He did not cry. He did not rage. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the Han River and made a list in his mind. Succession, asset transfers. Which rivals would smell weakness? Which allies would become vultures? He thought of everything except the hollow, howling fear. He was 38. His empire was worth, on paper, over $80 million, and it meant nothing. He checked into the hospital under a false name 2 days later for the first round of aggressive treatment. The fortress had a crack, and he needed to hide it from the world. The private suite was sleek, silent. He sat on the edge of the bed, the starch of the hospital gown unfamiliar under his tailored jacket. The weight of the diagnosis finally pressed down, not as fear, but as a profound, bitter loneliness. The boy from the asterisk Gasiwan was dying alone, just as he'd lived most of his life. That's when the door opened. No knock, she just entered. A black woman in a tan trench coat, her braids long past her shoulders. She had a stillness that mirrored his own. In her outstretched palm lay a small, tarnished brass key. Her eyes held his, unflinching. He did not call for security. His instincts, razor-sharp for 2 decades, were silent. He was just arrested. "Your father sent me," she said. The words didn't make sense. They bypassed his brain and went straight to a primal wound. His father was a ghost, a void, a man erased from history. For 20 years, father meant abandonment, betrayal, a lesson in never trusting. And now, at the absolute nadir of his life, this stranger invoked him. "My father is dead," Yi Hyun said, his voice a low rasp, the first words he'd spoken in hours. "He is alive," she replied, her Korean fluent but accented. "And he has been watching you, every step, every victory, every loss." A storm of emotions he had spent a lifetime damming up broke through. Confusion, rage, a pathetic, desperate hope he despised himself for feeling. His eyes burned. He clenched his jaw, fists tight on his knees, but the tears came anyway. They streaked down his face, hot and shameful. The crime boss cried, and the woman just waited, her hand steady, the key catching the low light. "Why now?" he managed to whisper. "Because now you have nothing left to lose," she said, "and he has nothing left to hide. The key is to a safe deposit box at the Korea Exchange Bank in Myeongdong, box number 714. Inside is a letter from him, and the truth about why he disappeared." She placed the key on the bedside table. "The box is in your name. It has been since you were 18. He could never bring himself to contact you until he learned you were dying." She turned to leave. "Wait," Yi Hyun commanded, the old authority flooding back into his voice. "Who are you?" She paused at the door, looking back. "My name is Amina. He saved my life a long time ago. I owed him a debt. Delivering this was the final payment." And then she was gone as quietly as she arrived. Yi Hyun was left with the key, the echoing words, and a tsunami of questions. Was it a trick? A cruel scheme from a rival? But how would they know the deepest, most secret wound of his life? He picked up the key. It was cold, real. The number 714 was etched into the bow. A memory flickered, weak and distant. His 7th birthday. His father had given him a small model taxi. "Someday, son," he'd said. "Someday we'll ride together." The date, July 14th. Coincidence or a sign? The doctor's prognosis meant he had limited time, limited energy. Every resource needed to be directed toward securing his empire. Chasing a ghost was the definition of weakness. It was a distraction he couldn't afford. He closed his hand around the key, the metal biting into his palm. He should throw it out the window. He should have his men find the woman and extract the real story. He should be dealing with the very real crisis of his mortality. But the boy in the asterisk Gasiwan won. The boy who waited for a father who never came home. The next morning, discharged against medical advice, Yi Hyun stood across the street from the Korea Exchange Bank. He wore sunglasses, a hat pulled low. He felt exposed, a feeling he hated. This was the first unpredictable move he'd made in 20 years. He crossed the street, entered the marble lobby, and presented the key and a fake ID that matched the name on the box. The clerk, after verifying the signature, led him to the vault. The moment was surreal. The sterile quiet of the bank, the clang of the large vault door, the wall of identical metal boxes. The clerk inserted her key, he inserted his. A turn, a click, and a small, long drawer slid out. Inside was a single sealed manila envelope, yellowed with age. On the front, in his father's unmistakable handwriting, were two words, Konehinus, Koadu Enus, my son. Yi Hyun took the envelope to a private viewing room. His hands, which had never shaken during violent confrontations, trembled now. He broke the seal. Inside were not pages of explanation. There was a single, faded photograph and a slip of paper with an address. The photograph stopped his heart. It showed his father, Minseok, looking a decade older than he remembered, but alive. He was standing in front of a small, sun-bleached building with a corrugated metal roof. He wasn't alone. His arm was around a young black woman, a teenager, her face solemn. It was unmistakably Amina, years younger. Behind them was not a Korean landscape, but a vast, dry terrain dotted with acacia trees. This was not Seoul. This was not even Korea. The slip of paper held an address in Nairobi, Kenya, and a date written 20 years prior, the exact week his father disappeared. Yi Hyun stared at the evidence. His father hadn't died in a ditch or run off with another woman. He had fled the country, to Africa, and he had taken or saved or found a young girl named Amina. The careful narrative of abandonment Yi Hyun had built his life upon exploded. His father didn't just leave. He vanished to another continent. He started another life. And he had been watching, all this time, as his son built a criminal empire from the ashes of their family. The betrayal was deeper, more calculated than he ever imagined. But beneath the volcanic rage, a colder, more dangerous question surfaced. Why? What was so terrible that Kang Min-seok had to fake his own death, abandon his family in poverty, and disappear to the other side of the world? The letter provided no answers, just a photograph and an address. It was an invitation or a trail of breadcrumbs. And with 6 months to live, Kang Yi Hyun had a choice. He could turn his back again on the ghost of his father, or he could spend what little life he had left chasing a truth that might destroy him completely. He left the bank, the envelope hidden inside his jacket. He got into his waiting car, his driver eyeing him cautiously. "Where to, boss?" the driver asked. Yi Hyun looked out the window at the Seoul skyline, the fortress he built. Every building, every deal, felt hollow, a monument to a lie. "To the airport," he said, his voice quiet with a decision that felt like freefall. "And book a ticket to Nairobi." He was going to find his father. But as his plane lifted off from Incheon International Airport, leaving his empire and his enemies behind, he couldn't shake the chilling realization. Some secrets are buried for a reason, and a man who has been hiding for 20 years doesn't want to be found. Nairobi was a shock to every one of Yi Hyun's senses. The vibrant chaos, the thick air, the unfamiliar sounds. It was the opposite of his controlled glass and steel soul. Here, he wasn't a boss. He was a lost, sick foreigner following a 20-year-old trail. The address led him to Kybra, one of the largest informal settlements in Africa. The scale of it, a city within a city built from corrugated metal and hope, overwhelmed him. The specific location was a community health clinic, a small, sun-bleached building with a rusted roof, the exact one from the photograph. A nurse at the door, seeing his obvious illness and confusion, took pity on him. "You look for Dr. Kang?" she asked in careful English. "Dr. Kang." The words hit Yi Hyun like a physical blow. His father, a taxi driver, was known here as a doctor. The lie was deeper than he thought. He just nodded. "He is not here now. He travels to the rural clinics. Maybe 1 week. You are family." "His son," Yi Hyun said. The the word tasting like ash. The nurse's eyes widened with recognition and something else, pity. Ah, the son from Korea. He speaks of you sometimes. He keeps a picture. She gestured for him to wait, disappearing into the back. She returned with a cup of water and a folded piece of notepaper. On it was a hand-drawn map and a name. Sister Grace Nyumbani Children's Home. She can tell you stories. This was the pattern, not a direct meeting but guided steps, a trail of people who knew his father. Yi Hyun was infuriated and fascinated. He was being managed even here. The Nyumbani home was on the outskirts of the city. Sister Grace was an elderly Kenyan nun with eyes that held decades of sorrow and kindness. When Yi Hyun introduced himself, she didn't seem surprised. She simply said, "He knew you would come once you got the key. He prayed you would not. Come, sit." In her sparse office, over bitter tea, she began to unravel the past. Her father arrived here in late 1998. He was not a doctor then. He was a broken man running from a great sin, or what he believed was a sin. She explained that Min Seok had been driving his taxi that fateful night in Seoul. His last fare was a man, Korean, well-dressed, desperate. The man offered him an extraordinary sum of money for a single job, drive a package to a warehouse in Incheon. No questions. Min Seok, with his own taxi dream so close, saw a shortcut. He agreed. He drove, but he was not a fool. The man's nervousness, the weight and shape of the package, it felt wrong. At a red light, he made a choice that would define the rest of his life. He opened the package. Inside was not contraband. It was a person. A tiny, malnourished, unconscious child, a girl no more than 4 years old, sedated and wrapped in a blanket. Human trafficking, and not just any trafficking. The well-dressed man was part of a sophisticated ring that supplied children to a network of wealthy, untouchable clients across Asia. The girl was to be shipped out that night. Min Seok panicked. He could not complete the delivery, but going to the police in Seoul was suicide. The ring had connections everywhere. He saw the child's face and he thought of his own son, Yi Hyun. In a moment of terrified, decisive clarity, he drove to the bus terminal. He placed most of his savings and a note for his wife in a locker, knowing the ring would come to his home. The note warned her to take Yi Hyun and hide, to deny everything. He then used the last of his money to buy 2 tickets on the next international flight he could find that required no visa for him, a flight to Cairo with a connection to Nairobi. He fled with the stolen child. He believed he was saving her, Sister Grace said softly, but he also doomed his own family. The men he crossed, they were not ordinary criminals. They were powerful. They would have killed your mother and you to silence him. His disappearance was the only shield he could give you. If he was gone, presumed dead, or a thief who ran off with the money, you were not a threat. You were just victims. Yi Hyun sat in stunned silence. The abandonment was not cowardice. It was a desperate, catastrophic sacrifice. His father chose to save a stranger's child, believing it was the only way to protect his own. He carried the guilt of both decisions, leaving his family and stealing a child every single day. The girl, Yi Hyun finally asked, his voice hollow. Was Amina, Sister Grace nodded. She was sick for a long time. Trauma, malnutrition. Your father, he nursed her back to health. He worked 3 jobs here to pay for her care. He learned basic medicine out of necessity to help here at the clinic. That is why they call him doctor. He raised her as his own. He gave her his name, Kang Amina. The pieces snapped together with devastating clarity. The woman in the hospital room wasn't just a messenger. She was the reason. She was the child his father saved. She was his sister. The world tilted. His father hadn't started a new family out of selfishness. He had built one out of penance and love, a love he couldn't show to the son he left behind. Where is he now? Yi Hyun demanded, a storm of conflicting emotions raging inside him, grief, fury, a heartbreaking understanding. He moves between rural clinics. He is a hard man to find, but he left something for you, knowing I might see you first. She handed him a small, locked metal box. The key you have opens this too. Back in his hotel room, a cheap place he'd chosen to avoid his own identity, Yi Hyun used the brass key. It fit perfectly. Inside the box were three items. First, a stack of faded Korean news clippings from 1999, articles about an unsolved child abduction case. The girl's name was Park Mi-young. Her photo, even at 4, was undeniably Amina. The articles stopped abruptly after 6 months. The case went cold. Second, a handwritten ledger, page after page of dates and amounts stretching back 20 years. Money sent every single month to a bank account in Seoul. The account number was familiar. It was his mother's old account, the one she'd closed when she got sick, believing the small deposits were a mistake or government aid. His father had been sending money. The total was a staggering sum. Hush money from the traffickers? No. The notes indicated the source: construction work, driving, clinic salary. Every shilling was earned through brutal, honest labor. The third item was a recent sealed letter, addressed simply to Yi Hyun. With trembling hands, he opened it. "My son, if you are reading this, you are dying, and Sister Grace has told you the truth. I have no right to call you son. I forfeited that right in a moment of fear and a lifetime of silence. I saved a child. I doomed my child. There is no calculus that makes this balance. Every one I sent was a prayer you would never need it. Every article I saved about your business was a knife in my heart. I watched you become strong, and then I watched you become hard. I saw you build a fortress on the foundation of my betrayal. That is my legacy. The men I crossed are still out there. They became more powerful, more embedded in the legitimate world. They never forgot the driver who stole their merchandise. They have long tentacles. This is why I stayed dead. This is why Amina, who is a lawyer now, used all her skills to hide me. My reappearance would put a target on you, and now on her. But you are sick, and the debt of truth is the only thing I have left to give you." The man who gave me that package in Seoul was named Choi. He worked for the Jumgangpa, but he was just a foot soldier. The man who ran the operation, the man whose client was waiting for that little girl, is someone you know. It is the man you call your mentor, Big Choi. He never recognized you because he never knew my name. He only knew the face of the driver who failed him. He took you in, Yi Hyun, and shaped you, not knowing he was molding the son of the man he wanted to skin alive. The irony is a kind of hell. I am so sorry for everything. I will be at the clinic in Kybra in 3 days. If you wish to see me, I will be there. If you wish to spit on my grave, I understand. Your father, Min Seok. Yi Hyun dropped the letter. The room spun. The cancer in his body was nothing compared to this metastasis in his soul. Big Choi, the man who gave him his first real job, the man who taught him about power, the man he had quietly outmaneuvered and marginalized over the years, but who still sat on the council of elders. His mentor was the monster from his father's story, and his entire empire was built, unknowingly, within the belly of the very beast his father fled. This wasn't just a family tragedy. This was a death sentence. If Big Choi ever discovered who Yi Hyun really was, the son of the driver who betrayed him, he would eradicate him and everything he'd built. The illness was a ticking clock. Big Choi was a live wire in the room. And his father was a brave, foolish, broken man waiting in a clinic in Kybra. Yi Hyun had 3 days. 3 days to decide whether to meet the ghost. 3 days before his scheduled chemotherapy back in Seoul, which he was already ignoring. 3 days where his empire was leaderless, vulnerable to the very man he now knew was his mortal enemy. He looked at the news clipping of the abducted girl, Mi-young. He thought of Amina, the fierce, composed woman who stood in his hospital room. She had grown up knowing the truth. She carried this secret too, and she had delivered the key, knowing it might blow up both their lives. He needed to see her. He needed the other side of the story. Tracking her down wasn't difficult. Her name was in the local legal directory. Kang Amina, human rights attorney. Her office was in a modest building in Nairobi's city center. He didn't call. He just appeared. When she opened her door and saw him, she wasn't surprised. She simply stepped back to let him in. Her office was orderly, walls lined with law books and photographs of her with communities, with children. A life of service, a stark contrast to his own. "You read the letter," she stated. "He thinks he's protecting me by staying away," Yi Hyun said, his voice raw. "He's wrong. He threw me into a pit with a wolf and called it safety." Amina met his gaze. He did what he thought a father should do. He absorbed the violence so it wouldn't touch you. Was it the right choice? I live every day because of his wrong choice. You suffered every day because of it. There is no right. "Big Choi," Yi Hyun said, the name of venom in his mouth. "Did you know?" "I found out 2 years ago," she said, her composure cracking slightly. "While building a case against a local trafficking cell with ties to Asia, the name came up. The pattern matched. I connected it to Appa's story. I wanted to tell you then, to warn you. He forbade it. He said your power was your protection. That knowing would make you vulnerable." "My power is built on sand," Yi Hyun snapped. "He's on my board. He has people in my operations. If he finds out who I am—" "He will kill you," Amina finished, coldly factual. "And he will take everything. He is a man who holds grudges across decades. Appa knows this. That is why he is so afraid." Yi Hyun paced the small room, the walls feeling like they were closing in. "I have to go back. I have to deal with this." "And do what?" Amina challenged. "Kill him. Start a war you are too sick to finish. Your organization is already unstable because of your absence. You are not thinking like a boss right now. You are thinking like a son who just got his heart broken." Her words were a slap. She was right. The cold, calculating part of his mind was scrambled by the emotional tsunami. He was making decisions from a place of pain, not strategy. "What do you suggest?" he asked, a bitter admission of helplessness. "See him," she said softly. "See Appa, look him in the eye. Then you will know what you need to do. The answer isn't in Seoul yet, it's here." The 3 days of waiting were an agony. Yi Hyun felt his body weakening, pains sharper, fatigue deeper. The cancer was not waiting. He spent the time digging, using his resources from afar, piecing together the hidden connections between Big Choi's old operations and his current legitimate businesses. The trail was there, carefully laundered but visible once you knew where to look. Real estate deals that acquired properties near ports, shipping logistics companies with odd subsidiaries. It was all still running, just better hidden. And his own empire was, in part, built on this contaminated foundation. The morning of the 3rd day, he walked to the Kybra clinic. His father was sitting on a wooden bench outside, under the shade of the corrugated metal awning. He was old, much older than the photograph. His hair was white, his face deeply lined by the African sun and a lifetime of guilt. But his eyes, when they looked up and locked with Yi Hyun's, were the same. The eyes that had looked at him over a model taxi. For a long minute, neither man spoke. The sounds of the settlement, children laughing, goats bleating, music from a distant radio, filled the space between them. "Yi Hyun," Minseok said finally, his voice thin and cracked. Hearing his childhood name from that voice unleashed something. All the rage, the loneliness, the decades of curated hardness dissolved into a single, pathetic sentence. "Why didn't you take me with you?" Minseok's face crumpled, tears streamed down his weathered cheeks. "I was being chased. I had a drugged, stolen child. I was crossing borders illegally. It was a nightmare journey. I thought you were safer in the hell you knew than in the hell I was running to. I was a coward. I was wrong. I have wished for death every day since." The raw, unvarnished confession disarmed Yi Hyun completely. There was no defense, no justification, just regret. He sat down heavily on the bench, not beside his father but facing him. "Big Choi," Yi Hyun said. Minseok flinched. "You know. He raised me. He taught me everything. He is inside my house." A profound horror dawned on Minseok's face. No, that is my fault too. I led the wolf to my own child. He put his head in his hands. You have to run, disappear like I did. I have 6 months to live, Yi Hyun said, the clinical fact a useful weapon in this emotional battle. Running is not an option, and I have an empire to protect. From him. Min Seok looked up, a fierce, paternal light flashing in his eyes for the first time. Then you destroy him. You use everything he taught you against him. You wipe his evil from the earth. The vehemence was shocking. This was the man who had run, now urging his son to stand and fight. It's not that simple, Yi Hyun said. He is entrenched. He has protection. To move against him openly is a civil war I might not win, especially now. Then you do not move openly, a new voice said. Amina walked up, having listened from the doorway. She held a file folder. You move like a lawyer, like a son seeking justice for a crime committed 20 years ago. She opened the folder. It contained copies of the old abduction case, the ledger of payments, sworn affidavits from Sister Grace and others about Min Seok's story, and modern financial records linking Big Choi's shell companies to known trafficking routes. This is not about gang rivalry. This is about a little girl named Park Mi-young. This is about human trafficking. This is a story the public and the prosecutors can understand. You take his legitimate mask off. The moment he is exposed, his own people will abandon him. They are businessmen now. They hate scandal. Yi Hyun looked from Amina's determined face to his father's desperate one. They were offering him a new weapon, not a pipe or a threat, but the truth. A truth that could burn down everything, including parts of his own legacy. But it was a path that required him to step into the light, to ally with the ghost and the sister he never knew, and to betray the man who shaped him. It meant turning his final act from one of consolidation to one of annihilation. He stood up, the decision crystallizing in the Nairobi sun. He was not just a crime boss securing his succession. He was Kang Yi Hyun, the son of Kang Min Seok, and he had a debt to collect. I'm going back to Seoul, he said, and I'm going to bury Big Choi, but I can't do it from here. I need to be inside the fortress. He looked at his father. Come with me. Min Seok paled. I can't. I'm a dead man there. You're a witness, Yi Hyun countered, his voice taking on the old, commanding edge. The key witness, and I need you to look Big Choi in the eye and tell him you remember, that the driver remembers. It was a cruel demand. It was asking his father to walk back into the lion's den after 20 years. Min Seok looked at Amina, then back at his son. He saw not a request, but a reckoning. He nodded once, a silent surrender to his son's will. As Yi Hyun booked 3 tickets back to Seoul, a plan forming in his mind, a cold alert chimed on his encrypted phone. A message from his second-in-command back home. It was only 3 words, but they froze his blood. Boss Choi is asking, where are you really? The wolf was already sniffing at the door. The message was a tremor, a warning that the ground in Seoul was already shifting. Yi Hyun's carefully constructed world was cracking, and the man he called mentor was pressing his ear to the fissure. He sent a terse reply. Medical complications, extended stay in Japan, handle it. A weak lie, but it bought a few hours. The flight back was a tense, silent affair. Yi Hyun sat apart, strategizing, battling waves of nausea. Min Seok stared out the window at the clouds, a ghost returning to a city that had forgotten him. Amina worked on her laptop, compiling digital copies of their evidence, building a legal fortress around their fragile truth. They landed at Incheon under a slate-gray sky. Yi Hyun's car was waiting, but his driver was new. A young, sharp-eyed man he didn't recognize. Where, Kim? Yi Hyun asked, his guard instantly up. Sick boss, I'm Park, sent from the main pool. The answer was too smooth. Yi Hyun exchanged a glance with Amina. Big Choi's reach was extending, testing the seams of his security. Instead of going to his penthouse, Yi Hyun directed them to a safe house, a nondescript apartment in Mapo used for sensitive meetings. The moment they were inside, He collapsed into a chair, sweat beading on his forehead. The journey had taken a brutal toll. Amina immediately took charge, helping him with medication, while Minsiok watched, his face etched with helpless grief. "We don't have weeks, we have days," Yi Hyun gritted out, breathing through the pain. "Choi is making moves. I need to be seen to project strength, and we need to use our evidence now before he consolidates." Amina opened her laptop. "The strategy is twofold: the court of law and the court of public opinion. We file a formal criminal complaint for the historic abduction of Park Mi-young, citing new witness testimony and evidence. We simultaneously leak the story to a trusted, independent journalist. The goal is not just to arrest Choi, but to publicly brand him. Once he is a trafficking monster in the eyes of the media, his political protections will evaporate. His own allies will cut him loose to save themselves." It was a good plan, a civilian plan, but Yi Hyun knew the underworld didn't read newspapers before it acted. "And when he sends men to this apartment to kill us all before the news hits?" he asked. Amina didn't flinch. "That's where your part comes in. You are the shield. You have to keep him looking at you, the rival boss, not at the ghosts from his past." So Yi Hyun re-entered his kingdom. He went to his office at Kang Holdings, pale but impeccably dressed. He called a meeting of his inner circle, including Big Choi. He announced bluntly that he was undergoing treatment for a manageable condition, that he was restructuring operations for greater efficiency. It was a performance of controlled vulnerability. He was telling them he was weakened but still in charge. He watched Choi's face. The older man's expression was unreadable, a mask of concerned loyalty, but his eyes, cold and reptilian, missed nothing. After the meeting, Choi lingered. "Japan, you said. You look like you saw a ghost, not a doctor." "The treatment is harsh," Yi Hyun replied, meeting his gaze. "It strips you down, makes you see things clearly." "Sometimes clarity is dangerous," Choi said, his voice a low rumble. "A man starts seeing enemies where he has friends." He leaned in slightly. "I heard a rumor, a strange rumor, that a woman was asking about a very old story, a story about a driver and a missing child. Nonsense, of course, but rumors have a way of bothering old wounds." The threat was veiled but absolute. Choi knew, maybe not everything but enough. The trap was closing. That night the first move happened. Not against Yi Hyun, but against his assets. Two of his most profitable construction sites were abruptly shut down by city inspectors citing newly discovered safety violations. The orders came from a department head known to play golf with Choi's lawyers. It was a warning shot across the bow. "I can dismantle your empire brick by brick." Yi Hyun retaliated in kind. He released a dossier to a rival council member detailing Choi's illegal gambling operations. Police raids followed. It was a messy, public skirmish between two respected businessmen, shocking Seoul's elite. The narrative was perfect, a bitter corporate feud. It hid the true, bloody heart of the conflict. While the two men dueled in the boardrooms and back channels, Amina worked. She filed the criminal complaint. She met with a journalist from a major newspaper, laying out the story of Park Mi-young, the heroic driver and the powerful man who stole children. The journalist, a woman with a reputation for integrity, was cautiously convinced. She needed one more thing: corroboration from another source, someone inside Choi's old organization. This was the flaw in the plan. They had no insider. The men from that era were either dead, loyal to Choi, or too terrified to speak. Then Minsiok, hunched over a laptop in the safe house, made a breakthrough. He had been poring over the old ledger of his payments, cross-referencing dates with news archives. He found a connection he had missed for 20 years. The month he started sending money home, a low-level Jumgangpa enforcer was found dead in the Han River. The official cause was a gambling debt killing, but Minsiok remembered the man's face. He was the one who handed him the package that night, the foot soldier. "Choi didn't just let me go," Minsiok whispered, his eyes wide with a new horror. "He cleaned house. He killed his own man to tie up loose ends, but he never found me." So there's a witness to the murder, Yi Hyun said, a spark igniting. Not to the trafficking, but to Choi's cover-up. A witness who might be willing to talk if they knew Choi didn't get everyone. Finding that witness meant diving into the darkest corners of Seoul's past. Yi Hyun used his network not for muscle but for information. He sought out retired cops, aging fixers, the ghosts of the old gangland. It was Amina, using her legal research skills, who found a name. The dead enforcer had a younger sister. She had been paid off, given a small shop in Itaewon, and had never spoken a word. Her name was Lee Hai-rai. They found her running a tiny tailor shop. She was in her 50s, her face lined with a permanent wariness. When Amina and Yi Hyun entered, her eyes darted to the door, expecting trouble. Amina spoke gently, showing her the photo of her brother. The woman's hands shook. "He was not a good man," Hai-rai said, "but he was my brother. They said he drowned, but his hands, they were tied." "The man who gave the order is still powerful," Yi Hyun said, "but he is vulnerable now. You can help put him away, for your brother." The woman looked at them, a lifetime of fear battling a spark of long-suppressed anger. "What do you need?" They needed her testimony, a sworn affidavit that her brother had confessed to her, the night before he died, that he was involved in a child deal that went wrong, and that Big Choi was panicking. It was hearsay, but it was a thread that could unravel the sweater. As Hai-rai dictated her statement to Amina, the walls of the safe house were breached, not by force, but by a different kind of weapon. Yi Hyun's phone buzzed with a news alert. Then another. The headline was a punch to the gut. KANG Holdings boss in secret Nairobi trip amid illness, rumors linked to African crime syndicates. The article was pure poison. It mentioned his mysterious absence, his diagnosis, and included grainy, long-lens photos of him outside the clinic in Cairo with Amina and Min Seok. It speculated about money laundering, offshore deals, and implied he was seeking illegal treatment or making new criminal connections. The source was cited as industry insiders. It was Choi's masterpiece. He had reframed Yi Hyun's quest for truth into a narrative of corruption and weakness. The public feud now had a global, sinister dimension. Yi Hyun's phone began to ring incessantly. Board members, partners, reporters. His legitimacy, his carefully built facade, was crumbling in real time. Worse, the article made no mention of trafficking or the past. It was a preemptive strike, muddying the waters before Amina's story could even break. They were outmaneuvered. The journalist working with Amina called apologetic. Her editor was now nervous, calling it a he said, she said between two rival gangsters. The story was on hold. The legal complaint was now just one of many filed in a busy prosecutor's office, likely to be buried. Min Seok watched his son's face as the calls came in, as the color drained from it. The guilt was unbearable. "I did this," he muttered. "My past is a poison. It infects everything." In that moment of despair, Yi Hyun made a decision. The civilized war was lost. Choi had played the media game better, so he would force a different end, a final, personal end. He called Choi directly. No intermediaries. The older man answered on the second ring, amusement in his voice. "Yi Hyun, you've had a busy day in the press." "Enough games," Yi Hyun said, his voice deathly calm. "You want to know what I was doing in Nairobi? I was meeting the driver, the one who took your package. He's alive, and he's here in Seoul." There was a long, dead silence on the line. The amusement vanished. "You're lying." "I have him, I have the girl, all grown up. I have the ledger of everyone you ever paid to silence people. I have a witness to the murder of your enforcer. You're finished, Choi, but I'll give you one chance. A meeting, just you and me. No soldiers, no lawyers. We settle this the old way. One conversation." Choi's laugh was harsh, brittle. "You think this is a movie? You're a sick boy playing with stories." "Then you have nothing to fear," Yi Hyun countered. "Unless you're afraid of the truth. Tomorrow night, 10 p.m. at the warehouse dock in Incheon, Pier 19. The place where it all started. Come alone, or I release everything to the world the moment I see a shadow." He hung up. It was the most dangerous gamble of his life. He was inviting the wolf into a bare room. Amina was horrified. "He will kill you. He won't come alone." "He'll come," Yi Hyun said, certainty in his hollow eyes. "His curiosity is stronger than his caution. He needs to see if the ghost is real. He needs to look my father in the eye, and he'll want to do it himself." The plan was simple and terrifying. They would go to the pier. Min Seok would be there, hidden but present. Amina would be nearby with a live streaming camera, a direct feed to her journalist contact, a dead man's switch. If anything happened to them, the whole story would broadcast in real time. It was a bluff, but a powerful one. But Yi Hyun had a second, secret plan. He knew Choi would not come alone. He knew he would not leave that pier alive. His illness had already written that ending. So his final act would not be a conversation. It would be a confession, recorded, forced from Choi's own lips in a moment of arrogant triumph. He wore a wire. The night was cold, the pier deserted, smelling of salt and rust. The warehouse loomed, a skeletal shadow against the city's distant glow. Yi Hyun stood alone under a flickering sodium light. He was frail, a silhouette against the dark water. In the shadows of a nearby cargo container, Min Seok waited, trembling. Across the pier, Amina watched through a long lens, her finger on the streaming button. Headlights cut through the fog, not one car but three. They fanned out, blocking the exit. Doors opened. Big Choi stepped out, flanked by 4 serious men. He had not come alone. Yi Hyun didn't move. "I said alone." "I am a businessman," Choi said, walking forward, his men hanging back but watching. "I come with insurance. Where is this ghost?" Yi Hyun raised a hand. From the shadows, Min Seok stepped into the edge of the light. He looked small, old, terrified, but he lifted his head and looked at Choi. Recognition was instant. Choi's confident smirk froze, then melted into a look of pure, unvarnished shock. It was the face from his nightmares, aged but unmistakable. "You," he breathed. "You are supposed to be fish food." "The driver remembers," Min Seok said, his voice gaining strength from his son's presence. Choi's shock curdled into rage. He turned to Yi Hyun. "And you bring this rat to me, after everything I gave you." "You gave me nothing," Yi Hyun spat. "You built me on the bones of my family. You took my father from me. You took that girl's life. You are a sickness." Choi laughed, a loud, ugly sound that echoed off the metal containers. "A sickness? I am the real world. You sentimental fool. I knew who you were. I knew within a year of taking you in." The air left Yi Hyun's lungs. The wire on his chest felt suddenly like a brand. "Her mother," Choi continued, savoring the revelation. "She kept a picture. I saw it when my men visited her to ask one last time about her missing husband. I saw the boy in the photo. It was you. I thought it was a delicious joke. The son of the man who betrayed me, learning at my feet. I watched you. I shaped you. I made you strong so I could break you when the time was right. And now," he gestured to Yi Hyun's weakened state, to the dying man before him, "the cancer is doing my work for me." Poetic. It was the final, devastating truth. His entire life had been a manipulated performance for an audience of one. His rage, his ambition, his empire, all of it had been cultivated by the monster in front of him. Choi stepped closer, his men easing forward. "Now we end this family reunion, permanently." This was the moment. The trap was not Yi Hyun's, it was Choi's, and they were all in it. But as Choi's men moved, a new sound cut through the night, the distant whine of sirens, growing rapidly closer. Flashing blue lights reflected on the warehouse walls, not 1 or 2 cars, but a convoy. Choi spun around, confusion on his face. "You called the police?" Yi Hyun smiled, a thin, cold smile. "No, but a sworn affidavit about a murder sent to a determined prosecutor with a live streaming backup tends to get their attention." He had not just worn a wire for Choi's confession. He had sent high-rise statement and their location to the authorities an hour before the meeting, via Amina's legal channels. The feud was no longer corporate or criminal. It was a homicide investigation with a witness on site. Chaos erupted. Choi's men scrambled. Choi himself, enraged, took a step toward Min Seok, but Yi Hyun moved with a final burst of speed, placing himself between his father and his mentor. The two men stared at each other, the sirens wailing around them. The student and the master, the son and the monster. "Checkmate," Yi Hyun whispered, as the police cars screeched onto the pier, their lights bathing everything in a stark, unforgiving blue. The blue lights didn't signal an end but a transfer. The battle on the pier was over. The war for the truth and for a legacy was just entering its final public phase. In the chaotic glare, Big Choi's arrogance evaporated. He was a man who operated in shadows and boardrooms, not in the crosshairs of a dozen police rifles and rolling news cameras. Amina's live stream had worked, picked up by a late-night news desk. He was not arrested as a titan of industry, but as a common murder suspect, shoved into the back of a patrol car, his face a mask of furious disbelief. His men were rounded up. Yi Hyun, too, was taken into custody, but for his own protection and as a material witness. The wire he wore captured Choi's entire, damning confession. The next 48 hours were a media supernova. The story of the billionaire crime boss, the long-lost father, the abducted girl turned lawyer, and the decades-old trafficking ring exploded across every channel and front page. The narrative Amina had tried to plant was now a forest fire. Choi's empire of respectability incinerated overnight. His political friends denounced him. His business partners filed lawsuits to distance themselves. The Jumgangpa, his old syndicate, issued a formal statement expelling him, calling him a stain on their more modern corporate endeavors. He was utterly isolated. In a sterile interrogation room, Min Seok gave his official statement. For the first time in 20 years, he told the entire story without fear. He was no longer a fugitive. He was victim number one. The prosecutors, now under immense public pressure, moved with unprecedented speed. Choi was charged with the murder of his enforcer, conspiracy to commit human trafficking, kidnapping, and a litany of financial crimes. The evidence was overwhelming. The tape, the ledger, the witness testimony, and now the return of Park Mi-young Amina to testify. But the legal victory was set against a ticking clock. Yi Hyun's health plummeted. The stress and the journey had accelerated the cancer's progression. He was released from custody into home hospice care, too weak to stand trial for his own lesser crimes. The state, in a controversial but pragmatic decision, offered him immunity in exchange for his full cooperation against Choi and for providing a complete roadmap to his own organization's dismantling. It was the ultimate deal, his empire for his father's justice. He accepted. From his penthouse, now more a hospital suite, he directed his lawyers and his few trusted lieutenants. Kang Holdings was systematically dissolved, its legitimate assets sold, its illicit operations handed over to the authorities on a silver platter. He was unbuilding everything he had created, brick by brick, wire transfer by wire transfer. It was the penance he never knew he needed to make. During this time, a fragile new routine formed. Min Seok moved into the penthouse not as a guest but as a caretaker. The roles were reversed. The father who had fled now bathed his son, adjusted his pillows, and read to him, not Korean poetry but old, dog-eared maps of the routes he drove in Seoul. They talked about the taxi, about the model car, about the small, ordinary memories that had been frozen in time. There were no grand pronouncements of forgiveness, just presence. The silence between them was no longer hostile. It was the quiet of two wounded men sharing a room as a storm passed outside. Amina was the bridge. She handled the legal vortex, the press inquiries, the victim advocacy groups that sprang up in the wake of the story. She also became the executor of Yi Hyun's final will. In it, he left the bulk of his remaining fortune, a still substantial sum from the legitimate sales, in a trust. Half was to fund the clinic in Kybra and a network of safe houses for trafficking survivors in Kenya and Korea. The other half was split between Amina and Minsiok. But the document contained one more instruction, a request. 2 weeks before the end, Yi Hyun asked to be taken to the Noryangjin fish market. It was a cold, clear morning. He was in a wheelchair, wrapped in blankets, Minsiok pushing him, Amina walking beside them. They stopped at the spot where a food stall once stood, where Big Choi had first noticed a quiet, hungry boy. Yi Hyun looked at the bustling market, the vendors, the families. "This is where I started," he said, his voice a whisper. "I want to end here with you, not in a fortress." That evening, back in the penthouse, he called his lawyer and Amina to his bedside. He had one final surprise, a detail he had uncovered in the final audit of his own assets, a ghost within the machine. "When I was dismantling the shipping logistics company," he explained, each word an effort, "I found a dormant subsidiary, a shell within a shell. It was set up by Choi years ago, but he'd forgotten about it. It held one asset, a portfolio of life insurance policies." He paused, gathering strength. "One of them was on my mother, taken out a month before the accident with Choi's group as the beneficiary. He was hedging his bets. If my father talked, he'd kill her. If she died naturally, he'd profit." Amina's hand went to her mouth. Minsiok closed his eyes, a fresh wave of grief for the wife he'd left behind. "The policy paid out when she died," Yi Hyun continued. "The money went into Choi's coffers. I found the transaction. It's evidence for the prosecution. But more than that, it means he profited from her death, from my mother's death." He looked at his father, his eyes fierce with a final, clarifying rage. "He didn't just take you from me. He monetized our suffering." This was the last hidden cruelty, the final piece of the puzzle that made the betrayal complete. Minsiok broke down, sobbing silently, his head on his son's bed. The guilt was now absolute, but so was the target of his hatred. It was no longer himself. It was Choi. "Use it," Yi Hyun whispered to Amina. "Bury him with it." 3 days later, Kang Yi Hyun passed away in his sleep. He was not in a hospital bed, but in his own living room, the curtains open to the Han River, his father holding one hand, his sister holding the other. The news was reported, but the tabloid frenzy had moved on. He died as the man who brought down Big Choi, not as the crime boss who built an empire. The funeral was small, private. Only Minsiok, Amina, and a handful of people from the clinic in Kybra who had flown in. As they stood at the graveside, a courier arrived with a letter for Amina. It was from Yi Hyun, posthumously delivered. "Amina, if you are reading this, I am gone, and you are handling everything because you are the strongest of all of us. The trust is yours to administer, but I have one more request. Our father is a man who has lived 2 lives, both defined by running. Do not let him run again. He will want to go back to Kenya to hide in his work. Do not let him. Make him stay. Make him build something new here with you, a family, not out of guilt but out of what's left. The clinic needs him, but his daughter needs him more. And I think, though he won't admit it, he needs her. Be his daughter. Let him be your Appa. It's the only good thing that can come out of this mess. Your brother, Yi Hyun." Amina read the letter, then handed it to Minsiok. He read it, his shoulders shaking. He looked at his daughter, then at his son's grave, and gave a single, slow nod. They did not go back to Kenya. Amina took over the Korean branch of the anti-trafficking foundation they had founded with Yi Hyun's money. Minsiok, using his hard-won medical skills, volunteered at a free clinic for the elderly in the same neighborhood where he once drove a taxi. They lived together in a modest apartment, not a penthouse. It was filled with books, maps, and 2 framed photos. One of a young Minsiok with his first wife and baby Yi Hyun, and one of Minsiok, Amina, and Yi Hyun in Nairobi, taken on a phone by Sister Grace, their faces tired but together. Big Choi was convicted on all charges and sentenced to life in prison without parole. The day the verdict was read, Minsiok and Amina sat in the courtroom, holding hands. They said nothing. They just listened. Then they left, went to a small restaurant, and ate a meal in quiet solidarity. The story of the crime boss who cried, the stranger with the key, and the father who returned from the dead faded from the headlines, replaced by new scandals. But in a quiet corner of Seoul, a different story continued. A story of a father and a daughter, building something from the ruins, not with bricks and fear, but with memory and a stubborn, hard-won grace. The key had unlocked more than a safe deposit box. It had unlocked a truth that shattered a life, and in the broken pieces, allowed two others to finally begin. The fortress was gone, in its place a home. So what remains after the fortress falls, after the tears dry, and the headlines turn to dust? Not the empire of fear, not the fortune, not even the vengeance, though it was served cold and complete. What remains is the quiet, stubborn fact of a father and a daughter sharing a meal in a small apartment. What remains is a clinic in Cairo with a new wing, and another in Seoul where an old man checks the blood pressure of people who remind him of the wife he lost. What remains is a story that traveled from a Seoul taxi to an African slum and back again. A story that proves the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun or a wire, but a truth told at the right time to the wrong person. Kang Yi-hyun died as he lived, making a calculated final move. But the calculation changed. His last deal wasn't for power but for peace. Not his own, but for the two people his father's single, catastrophic choice had bound to him. He traded a kingdom for their freedom, and in doing so, he freed himself from the boy in the asterisk Gasiwan who thought strength was a wall. He learned, too late and just in time, that real strength is a bridge. We are all, in some way, building fortresses. Against our past, against our pain, against the people who left us. We stockpile power, money, control, believing these walls will keep the old ghosts out. But the ghost is often in the blueprint. The wound is the foundation. The black stranger at the hospital didn't just deliver a key. She delivered a reckoning. She was the living consequence of a 20-year-old secret, walking into the sterile light and saying, "Look, this is what your pain built over there while you were busy building over here." The most dangerous man in Seoul was brought to his knees not by a rival, but by a reflection. Perhaps that's the ultimate lesson scribbled in the margins of this tragedy. We are not just the sum of what was done to us. We are also the sum of the secrets we keep, and the hidden connections between our choices and a stranger's survival half a world away. Our lives are stories written in ink that only becomes visible under a certain light, at a certain hour. Min Seok and Amina still live in Seoul. They are not famous. They are healing. Some days the guilt is heavy. Some days the memory of a brother is sharp, but they have each other and they have the work. That is the legacy, not an empire but a repair. The key opened a box, which opened a wound, which opened a heart. It's a messy, painful, and ultimately human transaction. And in a world obsessed with building taller walls and bigger fortresses, maybe the most radical act is to simply accept the key when it's offered. To follow the trail, no matter where it leads. Even if it leads you home. If you found this story of hidden connections and impossible redemption compelling, then you won't want to miss our next deep dive. We uncover the secret histories that shape our world every day. So hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You'll be the first to know when we publish our next documentary. Thanks for watching.